Hey guys, welcome back to Games of War. Today's episode, we're going to take a look at my top favorite Metroidvania style games. Hope you guys enjoy, and to be honest, the genre wouldn't even exist without the original Metroid and Super Metroid pioneering a new gameplay style. 2D side-scrolling action, platforming, getting to a certain point and being able to no longer progress further, having to go back and backtrack and get like an item or a special move ability, and then coming back after acquiring that and able to make it further into the map. It's a really compelling gameplay mechanic. I've always loved Metroidvania games. We've also got to give a very special mention to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is the game that brought the genre to the forefront, making the genre really stand out as something other than just a regular, mundane side-scroller action game. I've really got to give special mention to Castlevania Circle of the Moon. After Symphony of the Night, we hadn't really had any more Metroidvania adventures. Castlevania had been dormant for a minute. Now when this hit on the Game Boy Advance, we were reintroduced to the Metroidvania genre and all of its goodness, and this was an amazing title for the time. The Game Boy Advance was pretty early in its life cycle, and this was the killer app that it needed early on. Graphics were very impressive, if not a little bit dark on the original model. I remember when I got the SP, I was really able to enjoy this game to its fullest because it was really hard to see. It was very dark on the original Game Boy Advance. And this featured the gameplay, sprawling maps of Symphony of the Night, and great power-ups, very difficult game, a great story, excellent character. Circle of the Moon is what brought the Metroidvania back to the Nintendo handhelds, and this was great to have a Symphony of the Night quality action gothic platformer on the go. And this gave way to a slew of sequels on the Game Boy Advance, followed up on the DS, which I was really sad to see not continue on the 3DS, but I absolutely loved what this game brought and the games that came after it. Coming in at number 5, we've got Yoku's Island Express, and this is such an amazing, inventive, creative Metroidvania slash pinball game that I couldn't help but include it on this list. It's not really a Metroidvania in the purest sense, but it definitely uses the gameplay style mixed with the pinball mechanic to form something truly innovative and unique. I absolutely love pinball games, I always have, and I always loved when developers try to mix pinball with other gameplay styles, and this is probably the best example of mixing pinball with a different style of gameplay. It shines through everywhere. The physics are beautiful, top-notch. This could be a standalone pinball game with the physics that are this good, truly top-notch. Everything feels right. It feels how a pinball game should. The realistic physics help propel the gameplay to new heights, in my opinion. The bright, colorful island aesthetic is just gorgeous to look at. I absolutely loved the creative character, a dung beetle, being washed ashore on this island, taking over as the new postmaster. And it just so happens this island is facing an impending calamity, and it's up to you to save it, all the while taking up the job as the postmaster. The gameplay, atmosphere, and playability all make this very special indeed. You've got different characters you're going to meet all throughout the island, all creative, very original. They've got kind of a Banjo-Kazooie-ish kind of like babble to their language, and they're all really bright and colorful, and they've all got different errands for you to do, things for you to retrieve, characters to save, different situations to get friends out of, and you meet new people and make friends as you go along. And it's just a really charming aesthetic. I absolutely loved playing as a little dung beetle. You have like a little string that you're tethered to a ball, and it's this that you are used to knock around the environment. There's no jump button. You use the paddles, the right and left, to kind of manipulate through the environments, and it's definitely based on skill. You've got to really time your shots, and if you're familiar with pinball, you know how to definitely time shots to reach certain areas. And the levels are all laid out beautifully. Some are multi-leveled, multi-layered, actual pinball tables that are fashioned as levels, and it works so well. It's just a charming game through and through. The music is top-notch. Absolutely adored making my way through the island and seeing the different challenges as they ramp up as you get further and further in. Playing as a postmaster was great. So many different activities and different objectives and side missions to do. Metroidvania gameplay shines through in this mixed with pinball. It is one of the best games that I've played a couple years back. I absolutely fell in love with it. The Metroidvania and pinball elements combined to make such a unique game that you won't forget it long after you play it. The development team did a great job. It could have gone wrong, but they saved it, and this was an amazing experience. I absolutely loved Yoku's Island Adventure. At number 4, we've got Song of the Deep, and this is a really interesting release from Insomniac. They're a great studio. They're used to making big AAA games with a huge budget and pushing consoles to the limit in terms of visuals. This game was a much smaller scale release. It was about 5-6 hours. I think it was a $15 download game at first, with a physical edition announced shortly after. GameStop published the game, and I believe it was released exclusively in GameStop stores. However it went, I picked up the collector's edition. You guys know the drill. I'm a huge fan of anything set underwater, especially video games, and this was a Metroidvania game done by Insomniac, and it was done to perfection in my opinion. I absolutely loved the childlike aesthetic, the Celtic overtones. This game stars a young girl named Marin who is very close with her father, who is like a fisherman. He is constantly out at sea. One of these nights, he doesn't return from one of his fishing expeditions, and young Marin is deeply upset. She has visions and nightmares about her father being trapped at the bottom of the ocean. So she sets about doing what any normal 12-year-old girl would do. She builds a makeshift submarine and plunges into the depths of the ocean. Seeing previews of this game before it came out, I was really excited because of the visual style, and it didn't disappoint. Every part of the ocean is very unique. It has a nice subtle visual style, beautiful color palette, an amazing soundtrack, very Celtic in nature, that really fits the action and tone of the game. Marin's a really cool character to play as, very concerned about finding her father. The game is deeply rooted in exploration and puzzle solving, which normally isn't my cup of tea. I'm not really a fan of games that use puzzle solving as like gameplay mechanics in general. I prefer more combat and platforming. Obviously, this game doesn't have any platforming due to it being underwater, but the controls for the sub feel very nice to me. They're very responsive. The exploration aspect is really well done. It's got the Metroidvania flair through and through. Being able to upgrade your sub with like a retractable claw, make it more powerful. And this kind of plays into the gameplay in very important ways, using that claw to solve like physics-based puzzles, and it's very much about how things react underwater and coming up with different solutions to puzzles based on underwater physics. I had a lot of fun figuring these things out. None of them were too difficult where I couldn't get them, and trust me, I'm not the best when it comes to puzzle solving. I can be stumped rather easy. This game made it very enjoyable to play. I did like the puzzle solving very much. I really enjoyed the exploration. I didn't mind the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of combat. There's also sections where Marin exits the sub, and it kind of has like a Blaster Master feel to me. That's what it reminded me of. Exiting the sub, being able to swim around, and she has her own set of attacks with a knife. She has a separate health bar, which also drew a lot of Blaster Master comparisons for me. Having a separate life bar, you could be near death and you can finally make it back to safety to your sub, and you suddenly feel safe again. I absolutely loved the visual style. I loved the storytelling. It's got great dialogue told through kind of like comic book style panels and static screens. There's also a narrator that kind of tells the story through Marin's eyes as events happen on screen, which I really enjoyed. It was a very nice touch. And overall, it was a very nice change of pace for a Metroidvania game. Seeing the great diversity in the different sections of the ocean as you go deeper and deeper, and upgrading the sub and upgrading Marin as she's out of the sub was a lot of fun. The grapple claw was a lot of fun to use. The puzzle solving was brilliant. I absolutely adored my time with this game. It was lighthearted. It wasn't too heavy. It was kind of a quick finish, but I enjoyed every minute of this game. Song of the Deep is definitely on my personal list of one of my favorite Metroidvania games. What a great release from Insomniac, and definitely a must-own. Now, Timespinner comes in at number 3, and it's a very interesting game. I did not expect to enjoy this game nearly as much as I did. It is a Castlevania vibe throughout, permeates the game. It reminds me a lot of Castlevania. It's got that definite gothic feel without being overly gothic. The soundtrack highlights the beautiful level design, and it's got a time mechanic that really lends itself well to the Metroidvania style of gameplay. Being able to use the time mechanic and travel back in different time periods of this land definitely breathes new life into the genre, in my opinion. You play as Linnaeus, who is in this clan of time spinners. Basically, they are a tribe of people that use this time spinner device. If anything bad happens, they kind of go back in time and warn them in the past to avoid any kind of impending doom on their people. And it's always worked out well for them until Linnaeus' birthday is ambushed by this evil emperor, and he ends up slaughtering her family, murders her mother. While this horrible act is taking place, Linnaeus is rushed off to the time spinner to send her back in time to try to warn them of this disaster. Something horrible goes wrong, and she is sent to the Lochheim Empire, which is the homeland of the emperor that has murdered her family. Now she is stuck there. She has no idea why she's there, and it's up to there to piece together the storyline from there to figure out what this empire is all about, who this evil ruler is, why the family is slaughtered, and try to prevent this and save her race of people. The storyline is really well done in terms of its characters being fleshed out and her main character's plight of having her family slaughtered and trying to fix what is wronged, being able to use this time spinner that's always come in handy for them and kind of saw their people through all these tough times. It's kind of working against them now, so it's really interesting to see her go back and try to piece together events through characters, through dialogue. The environments themselves, all taking place in Lochheim Empire. It's a single world. One might think it become very repetitive, but the time spinner mechanic is used to great effect in the Metroidvania gameplay style. Being able to go back into the early days of the Lochheim Empire, you kind of had that medieval castles and different enemies that represent the time period. When you're sent into the future of Lochheim, you see this world transformed from this peaceful, serene, like lake-infested Gothic castles to this futuristic kind of mad scientist lair where there's experiments being conducted in these halls and all kinds of horrible shit going on in the future. Now, the gameplay is standard Metroidvania fare where you kind of get to a certain point, you can't progress any further, you got to go back, backtrack, get a new ability, come back, and proceed. Lunaeus herself is a really cool character to play as. You've got orbs that you use as power and ways of attacking. Different orbs do different things. You're able to unlock more as you go, and you can kind of combine them and mix and match any way you see fit to form different combinations, whether it's like a giant sword or electricity that's homing or big, huge, heavy hammers. You can equip one on each hand. You can use them and equip them as you see fit for different situations. You can also collect necklaces that have different magical spells. Gameplay really isn't anything that's going to change the way Metroidvania has been played or will be played in the future. I just really enjoyed the fact that the time travel element lends itself so well to the world. Overall, it's nothing you haven't seen before or experienced before in a Metroidvania title. It just all is done so very well. It's fun to wield the different orbs. Everything comes together to form a really solid adventure that I just really dug. The time travel and the overall look of the world, the feel, and the story. Absolutely fell in love with Timespinner and played it through to completion immediately. A fantastic game and definitely a must-own. Coming in at number 2, we've got Castlevania Portrait of Ruin, and this is a personal favorite of mine. Of the trilogy of DS games, I absolutely gravitated towards Portrait of Ruin the most out of all of them, and they're all 3 damn good games. But Portrait of Ruin is a continuation of the storyline and setting in Castlevania Bloodlines, playing as Jonathan, who is a son to the Jonathan Morris in Bloodlines. And the storyline I just find fascinating. This taking place during World War II, which is a favorite timeline of mine in history, real history that is. I just love the atmosphere, playing through Dracula's castle, as well as going through one of the main villains' paintings that are seemingly indestructible. You have to enter them and defeat them from the inside, kind of giving it a nice variety, a break from Dracula's castle. You're able to enter like Egyptian sand-filled environments. You're able to enter like London old school towns, and just a different variety to the environments and exploring different locales. Really came together for me. The highlight of this is playing as Jonathan and Charlotte. The 2 character switching can often be like a nightmare if not done properly. In this game, it is done to perfection. Playing as Charlotte and Jonathan, you're able to switch on and off at will, and you're able to use their different powers together in tandem for like a super attack, dual crushers. I also really enjoy the creativity in using both characters to solve certain puzzles, using them in tandem at certain gameplay points. Really clever uses of dual characters to solve puzzles. It just all comes together to form a really special Castlevania game. The gameplay elements there are from the beginning. You've got your whipping, you've got your jumping, you've got your different sub-weapons, you've got your different power-ups, you've got your different moves that you learn and come back and explore previously unexplorable areas. This has got a better use of the touchscreen elements of the DS. It's Castlevania through and through, but something about the setting and the gameplay style really came together for me. Portrait of Ruin is an absolute masterpiece. While I'm giving all the praise to Portrait of Ruin, I would be amiss not to mention the entire series on the handhelds. I previously mentioned Circle of the Moon, which was the first entry in the Game Boy Advance. It was followed up by Harmony of Dissonance, which was a pretty good follow-up in terms of gameplay. It was really easy, man, which is odd for a Castlevania game. It didn't really fulfill that from a gameplay standpoint. The graphics looked better, much brighter, easier to see what was going on. Large screen filling animated sprite work, beautiful looking game. Just the difficulty was way too easy and the music was trash. Absolute rubbish music, and that's one thing that Castlevania is known for, is the excellent soundtracks. So Harmony of Dissonance was a great follow-up, but Aria of Sorrow on the Game Boy Advance for me is where it all came together to form kind of like the perfect Castlevania game on the Game Boy Advance. It was different in a lot of ways. It took the standard Dracula's castle and the overall gothic feel and kind of threw that out the window in terms of a gameplay story perspective. This took place in a solar eclipse in the future. Soma Cruz entered Dracula's castle, and a theme kind of pervaded throughout the game, and you've got this excellent soul, kind of like Pokemon addictive quality where you can absorb these different powers. You never know what kind of different glyph you're going to absorb and different power-ups and mix and match. It's a great system that really has an addictive quality to it, never knowing what you're going to get next, keeping things fresh throughout. Graphics were the best they could get on the Game Boy Advance. Soma Cruz is a great character, and it was really fresh to kind of explore a solar eclipse in a kind of a futuristic Dracula setting. And that was continued in Dawn of Sorrow, the first entry in the DS, which was an amazing step up from the Game Boy Advance in terms of graphics and gameplay-wise. It's still the same thing, but it was just such a sight to behold in the DS. It was so impressive in early 2000s to see this game running on the DS hardware, kind of approaching Symphony of the Night looking visuals. Amazing soundtrack. It was a continuation of the storyline featured in Aria of Sorrow with the futuristic eclipse theme. Great gameplay. Once again, the addictive soul collecting abilities of Aria of Sorrow were present in Dawn of Sorrow, and this had some tacked on touchscreen uses. They really tried to used that touchscreen to full effect in those early DS days. It felt kind of tacked down in some spots. Some spots were pretty cool, like chipping away the ice and stuff, using different spells to kind of draw glyphs. But overall, I could have done without, but an amazing continuation on the DS. With Order of Ecclesia, we got probably the most impressive looking game of the bunch. The animation was just so silky smooth. Shnoa was an awesome looking character, a great storyline. Once again, kind of changing things up by not strictly taking place in a castle. Kind of different, more objective-focused missions taking place in different areas other than just Dracula's castle. A great variety to the environments and a great soul-absorbing glyph system once again. Order of Ecclesia is not to be missed. None of these games should be missed by any Metroidvania fan. They're all amazing, and Castlevania is one of my favorites of all time, along there with Metroid. So definitely do yourself a favor and pick up the entire series. Get them all. Portrait of Ruin would be my favorite, securing the number 2 spot, but they're all worth a look for sure. Amazing games. On to the number 1 spot for my favorite Metroidvania game of all time, we have got Metroid Fusion, and it's going to take a hell of an act of God to bump this out the number 1 spot. This game to me is absolute perfection, one of my favorite games of all time, bar none. This game came at such a special time. I remember Metroid Prime was being so hyped up on the GameCube, a league of its own in terms of visuals, a new fresh gameplay style of first person. Now all the while Metroid Prime was getting all this hype, and definitely deservedly so, Nintendo was also developing a companion game to release alongside Metroid Prime, a 2D companion, Metroid Fusion. And it was such a cool time to have a brand new console release of Metroid Prime with a bold new direction and a powerhouse 2D entry, kind of piggybacking off each other, able to link up with the Game Boy Advance and connect to the GameCube and unlock additional features. A perfect companion piece to a great new start for the Metroid games. Metroid Fusion just completely blew me away, man. This game has it all. On the handheld, it was just a league of its own. I haven't played this game in a few years, but I have finished it a couple of times, and I'm going to go off the cuff here, and this is a game that is rooted deeply in story, more so than any other Metroid game. It is more linear than the other Metroid games. There's kind of checkpoints to where you go to a briefing room and it tells you an objective and where you to go and what to do and why you're doing it. And I've got to say, this game is almost like a survival horror game, if not a horror game, in the fact that you are literally being stalked by this parasite SAX, and it's a fully powered Metroid, a fully powered Samus, and it is just nerve-wracking and nail-biting to see the fully powered Samus coming after you, all the while you're attempting to explore the space station. Before I get ahead of myself, the storyline is definitely the highlight in this game for me personally. In the beginning, it has a cutscene depicting Samus exploring the surface of a planet. She is gathering data. As this is taking place, she gets attacked by this parasite. It infects her suit. She is able to finish her mission. On the way back, she ends up losing consciousness in her ship, and the surveyors that were with her on this planet end up taking her back to the Federation, where she has an emergency operation. They're able to save her. Pieces of her suit were so infected they had to leave it like infused to her body. As she regains consciousness, this base is being attacked by this parasite that's kind of run loose on this space station, and she awakens to get a distress call and kind of has to explore the base from there, find out what this parasite is, why it's attacking, and how she can stop it. So the way she was saved and revived was she was injected with a kind of vaccine taken from the infant Metroid, and it's this vaccine that allows her to progress and start from scratch because this parasite has destroyed her abilities, taken all of her power, and she's basically starting from scratch. As you attack and kill monsters, you're able to absorb this X-parasite, and it kind of replenishes health and heals you. As you begin playing and making your way through this derelict space station, platforming, shooting just like in other Metroid games, you find out through cutscenes and storyline that this virus is able to mimic different life forms and entities, and it has done just that. SAX, it's basically a full-powered Samus that is stalking you, hunting you, and this is where the previously mentioned kind of horror elements, survival horror-ish kind of feelings come into play. As you're making your way through the space station, you're killing enemies and taking on bosses and fighting bigger organisms, absorbing the parasite and regaining your powers by absorbing this parasite, becoming stronger slowly. This SAX is just busting through walls, searching, hunting for you. It creates an atmosphere and layer of tension unlike any other. You're definitely being hunted by this powerful being that you know could take you out no problem. It's avoiding it at all costs, all the while continuing to make your way through the space station. Atmospheric, music is excellent. It's so well told through the cutscenes. The gameplay is rock solid. The controls, I'd never played anything like this on a handheld. This just completely blew my expectations out of the water. This redefined what Metroid was for me. Absolutely fell in love with the game. It made me love the series. I've been a huge fan since this game. So definitely, without question, Metroid Fusion is a must-own. It was originally titled Metroid 4, and this was done by the same development team that worked on Super Metroid, so it's just quality through and through. It raised my expectations for what a Game Boy Advance game could be. It's a complete classic. It holds up in every single way, and it's definitely my favorite Metroidvania game of all time. So sometime after Metroid Fusion was released, and it was released to critical acclaim, they announced a sequel, a direct sequel to Metroid Fusion called Metroid Dread. That was supposed to be on the DS. For some reason, it was kind of lost in development limbo all the way up until now. Fast forward to present day, Metroid Dread was just recently announced for the Switch and is done by the same developer that brought us the Metroid Samus Returns, which is in fact a remake or a reimagining of Metroid 2, which was a release that only came out on the Game Boy, original Game Boy Black and White. It's done by Mercury Steam. They did this, and they did Castlevania on the 3DS as well. First of all, I've got to get out of the way. If you are anyway looking for a showpiece for the 3D effect on the 3DS, the stereoscopic glasses free 3D, look no further than these two games here. Some of the best, most impressive looking 3D on the system. Really adds to the gameplay. It just has that effect of looking through a mirror, like a doorway into another world. Beautiful 3D effect. They have got the mastery down pat. Both games showcase it to an incredible extent. The 3D looks amazing. I'm not really a fan of the graphical style they chose to use in this game. I mean, the game looks great, don't get me wrong. The science fiction environments all look really good, but it's kind of 3D graphics on a 2D kind of gameplay style, and I wish they would have stuck with a more sprite-based looking game. I love the look of Metroid Fusion, and even more so, Metroid Zero Mission. This is another classic Metroid game that could be on anybody's top 5 list. It's up there with Fusion as one of the best games I've ever played in my life in the Metroidvania genre. And I've got to say, if you are looking to experience the first 2 games in the series, this being a remake of Metroid 2, this being a remake of the original Metroid, look no further than these 2 titles here, because they are grade A, AAA classics, up there with the best games ever made in my opinion. I absolutely love the Metroid series. Just a little concerned that Metroid Dread is being done by the same developer, Mercury Steam, and they're going with that same kind of graphical style that they employed in Samus Returns, which is kind of like a 3D-ish kind of look. It still looks good, don't get me wrong. I just wish they would have stuck with the sprite-based look of the originals on the Game Boy Advance, but I'm just glad we're getting Metroid Dread, and I couldn't be happier. Before we wrap things up, I've got to say that there's never been a better time to be a fan of the Metroidvania style of gameplay. There's so many games that have come out in the recent years that take this gameplay style and use it to such great effect. The next few games I'm going to briefly mention could have easily taken up any number of spot on my list. However, these games appear on almost every list, and I always try to give a different take, a different perspective on the standard lists that are out there. Ori and the Blind Forest and Will of the Wisps are 2 of the finest Metroidvania style games in existence. Originally out on the Xbox One, they're definitely a great fit on the Switch. If all ports could be done this well, look this good, and run this good on the Switch, I'd be a happy man. These games really tugged at my heartstrings, and I got so attached to this character and the sad story that unfolds in these. The platforming will have you on the edge of your seat and will test your abilities to the max, man. His abilities that you learn as you progress through the levels, pinpoint accuracy jumping and platforming, you've got to be on top of your shit. The escape scenarios are brutally difficult, that lack a lot of checkpoints, but overall some of the best looking games, best playing. Ori and the Blind Forest and its sequel are definitely not to be missed, some of the finest examples in the genre. Hollow Knight, man, where do I start with this one? This is a top of many Metroidvania lists. It's got phenomenal reviews. This game is all about venturing down into Hollow Nest and seeing a once thriving city now lying dead and in ruin due to this infection that has killed off the inhabitants and destroyed this once beautiful kingdom. And I cannot gush enough about making your way down in the depths, and around every corner there's a huge boss fight waiting to happen, new abilities to learn, and just learning the backstory and lore of what happened to this thriving city is something that cannot be understated. I absolutely fell in love with the lore and the backstory, and I wanted to know more and more. Each area was so diverse and unique, and it just had that feeling of wonder, discovery, and excitement. The overall atmosphere and ambience of this game cannot be understated. They have really crafted a wonderful world to explore. The combat is great. Everything comes together to form one of the best Metroidvania games I've ever played. One of the best games I've played bar none. Hollow Knight is definitely not to be missed. 2 games that would definitely be on this list had I not talked about them countless times in other videos previously: Monster Tale and Alien Infestation. Now, Monster Tale is a bright, colorful Metroidvania action platformer that mixes Pokemon-style monster-raising elements, and it's got really tight controls. It's got a great storyline featuring Ellie that's been transported into Monster World, where these other kids have already been transported, where they're kind of running roughshod over Monster World. It's up to you playing as Ellie to put a stop to these kids' evil deeds and get them out of Monster World and restore peace. It's got amazing juggle-heavy combat and all kinds of new abilities and items to uncover. A great world that connects seamlessly, great gameplay, Monster Tail is a definite underrated gem. I couldn't have been happier when I saw that Monster Tail is finally making a comeback on modern consoles. I'm assuming Switch. It was supposed to come out on the 3DS. It never came out. It just kind of was announced and then forgotten. So really happy to see this game getting its just due, and maybe we'll see it on the Switch. Alien Infestation is classic way forward through and through. They've done a masterful job with the Alien license, taking place in many locations from the movies. Very solid gunfights. It has a system where you can die and it's permanent death, but you can respawn as a different Marine, all with different storylines. Starting off as 4, it eventually bloats to like 14 or 15 different Marines, all with different storylines and dialogue. They all play the same, but it's really cool, and their characters are really fleshed out. Great story elements. The gunplay is super satisfying. Xenomorphs are definitely intense as hell. The firefights are engaging. Great Metroidvania gameplay. This was a phenomenal final release on the DS. Came out very late in the life cycle, but definitely a must-own. So hope you guys have enjoyed taking a look at my top 5 Metroidvania style games. Please in the comments below let me know what your top 5 is. Do you agree with what I said? Are some of your favorites some of my favorites? Do we have something in common? Do you disagree completely? Are you looking forward to Metroid Dread? What do you think of all the time it's taken to come out? What do you think of the graphical style, the developer? Please let me know in the comments. As always, I love you all. Games of War is absolutely nothing without you.